Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Permanent Values Part 5, highlighting some more values which define the structure of Deen. We will be covering another 5 permanent values today. These are the references, and you will notice that I have added the Book of Destiny over here, so there is some paragraphs taken from this book as well. This is our contact. Now, what I've done over here is I've added few general points in relation to these permanent values. What happens is that as we go through these values, some more points come up for our reflection. So what I do is that in every presentation, whatever new comes up, I try to share it over here. We have seen that a human self which lives life within the domain of relative values is simply not able to comprehend all that lies concealed within it. Even a comprehension of these values, that is permanent values, will expose the human intellect to those higher aspects of eminence and loftiness towards which the Quran directs our consciousness. So it is important that while we are living under the man-made systems and we know some of the relative values fairly clearly, if we look at these permanent values which we have gone through and more are coming up, that even to understand these values has added to the development of ourself. It is something which we were not aware of previously, and now we have become aware of it. Those who follow these values after having accepted Iman become aware of the gradual transformation taking place within their psyche as manifested through their outlook and decision making. An important aspect here is that with the acquisition of such a vision, one then judges others on what they are in terms of their character and outlook. And when we say judging others, which includes man-made system as well, that we look at those people who are running the affairs of man-made systems and see what is lacking in their personalities and psyche, which is causing all the problems. Rather than on their physical appearance, nationality, their spoken words, jobs, status, possessions. So what Quran does is it moves us away from the physical side of human beings into their psychological aspects. And that is important once we understand these permanent values, that what kind of psyche everyone else possesses, i.e. those who are not on the path of the Quran. There are 4 glaring aspects to these values. First, they can be understood even within the man-made systems. Second, some can be followed individually, and so the benefits associated with them can be reaped. So we should not go away with this in mind that these values can only be followed within the system of Deen. These can be followed at an individual level as well and within the family setup. And we have pointed to that as we are going through these values. Third, family and children can be helped to understand these values if they show an interest in them. Fourth, without access to these values, Deen can neither be understood nor can it be established. Because if we do not understand something, we simply cannot establish it, because desire and need will not be there to pursue that particular course of action. As these values are the first step on the ladder of Deen after acquiring Iman. Permanent values which were covered in part 1 and 2. I'll just quickly go over it. Human self, respect for humanity or respect as a human being, the concept of Allah, ranks according to deeds, the law of requital, physical death, justice, ihsan, the existence of the life of the hereafter, the consequence of a crime, no one carries the burden of another, not to allow injustice, no human being can be the subject of another one, obedience of the law, promote good and forbid evil, warning and admonishment. And those permanent values which were covered in part 3, 4, and 5, that is 5 is we are covering today. The system of mutual consultation, never assign state duties to incompetent people. The responsibility for rizq is on the society. The means of rizq, what is beyond your needs. Mankind is one ummah. Chastity, there is no compulsion in the matter of deen. What is good for mankind remains on earth. Reward is for the work, not the capital. And today we will cover good deeds replace the effects of bad deeds. Eimaan and Saleh deeds, no restriction to be placed on free movement, no contradiction between word and deed. Allah's laws are immutable. And let us go to the first value of today's talk. Good deeds replace the effects of bad deeds. The Quran defined the law of requital through this verse, وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Allah created the heavens and the earth as al-haq, in order that each self may find the recompense of what it has earned and none is treated unjustly. We have gone through the finer aspects of this verse, where accountability of every human being is mentioned, that no human being can escape this law of requital, and we should use it for our good. How does this accountability function in the world? It has been described in various verses. For example, in one verse, Quran says, Alimat nafsumma qaddamat wa akharat. Then shall each self know what it has sent forward and what it has left behind. Very important that every stage of our life, every day, wherever we are making deliberate decisions, we should know what effects these will have in short term and what effects these will have in the longer term. Human beings have two aspects to their life. When they operate under the domain of their unbridled desires, they live a life in which no self-development can take place for the life of the hereafter. However, when they come to the guidance of the Quran, their self begins to develop once they start doing saleh deeds willingly after acquiring Iman, and this is where they need this permanent value. That is, they are going to make some mistakes, some errors, and they should know that what are those mistakes and how the effects of those mistakes in terms of the law of requital can be rectified. The Quran states in this verse, Innal hasanate yuzhibna sayyiate zalika zikra lizzakireen. For those things that are good, remove those that are evil. And we should keep in mind that good and evil, which is discussed in the Quran, is in relation to human self. Because on the physical side, we know what is good for our body and what is not so good for our body. And even if we take something bad into our body, we suffer the consequences of it very quickly. But in the case of human self, it takes time. Whatever deeds we do now, their effects will show up somewhere in the future. So if we want good in the future, then we have to do a lot of good now. This is the zikr. And dhikr for those who remind themselves by being with those who are dhakireen. So over here, Quran has said that it is not enough that you think that you are doing it individually. You have to join up with those who are also on this path, because deen is the path of collective effort. Now, continuing with this permanent value, the first part of the verse, the same verse which I have quoted just now, that is Innal hasanate yuzhibna sayyiat. Waqim salata tarafin nahare wa zulafan minal layle. Establish the system of salat which covers the working day and all its aspects in human life. Part of this system is the permanent value, i.e., good deeds will replace the ill effects of any past wrong behavior. And this is both individual as well as collective. So in the study of the deen, we should always keep it in mind, the individual to collective. If the individuals are right and they come together, then they make a team. The permanent value should cover both aspects of human life, i.e., physical as well as the human self. The sub-clauses for this will be worked out under the system of deen through mutual consultation. So under this permanent value, details will be worked out that how to encourage people to do good so that their past negative effects can be rectified. And at a collective level, whatever the system was previously in place and which must have done a lot of bad things under the man-made system, those have to be rectified as well. The Quran has also referred to the procedure for dealing with human mistakes committed wittingly or unwittingly, which are realized later. And that is another important point, that we come to the Quran from a position where we were not guided by the Quran. So ultimately a stage comes where we realize that we have made a lot of mistakes in the past, and the Quran says, don't get into a state of regret, hopelessness and disappointment. Rather start doing a lot of solid deeds so that the effects of that could now occupy your psyche, yourself, and as a result, gradually the effects disappear. The gravity of these errors in relation to both causing harm to others and the consequent harm to own self. The recipe for this is called Tawbah and Islah. The whole teaching of the Quran is directed to the creation of a new world based on deen as a system, and this simply cannot begin to take shape by merely possessing Iman. Because with Iman, we change our intentions, we change our outlook, we change our vision, we change the way we look at things before acquiring Iman and after acquiring Iman. So there is a difference between the two. But now the next stage is to do some deeds. Iman must be followed by Saleh deeds. So Iman's verification comes through Saleh deeds. If we think we have Iman and we are not resorting to Saleh deeds, that means there is something wrong with our Iman. So it is cause and effect. Those interested need to study and analyze its verses with this aim in mind. Next slide is another aspect of rectification in life. Tawbah, when on his way to a particular place, if some person is going in certain direction, a person reaches a crossing, there he takes a turn and goes along. But after a short while, he realizes that he had put himself on the wrong path, which will not take him to his destination. He must now turn back and return to the point where he took the wrong turn. This kind of return is called Tawbah. Tawbah is not saying that it is my Tawbah and I will not do it again. No, that is not the way of Tawbah. Quran says wherever you have made a mistake, go back to that point where you have made that mistake and then take the right direction after figuring out why did you go wrong. It is obvious, however, that a mere return to the crossroads will not take the man to his destination. He will also have to adopt the right path. Tawbah therefore covers all three aspects of the process. Realizing one's error, and we can only realize one's error after getting the guidance from the Quran, because Quran decides what is right and what is wrong for ourselves. Retracing his steps and taking to the right course. And I've taken it from challenge to Islam, challenge to religion. In the terminology of the Quran, returning from the wrong path back to the crossroads is called Tawbah. And getting onto the right path from the crossroads is termed as being Eimaan and Saleh. And Eimaan and Saleh means those actions which bring out our best, which take out, through which we manifest our latent potentials. It's normally translated as righteous deeds, but this is not a true reflection of this word Saleh. In this way, the loss caused by human error is rectified. In human life, there are laws established by Allah for this kind of countering of consequences and recovery. Including these kinds of laws in the code of life is called Allah's Rahm in Quranic terminology. And it is in these very meanings that Allah is Rahim. And we know that the Rahm is related to human nourishment and development, and it includes both physical as well as the aspects of human self. Good deeds versus bad deeds and Amalul Hasana. Amal is the plural of Amal, which means action or deed. In English, the phrases good deeds and evil deeds are commonly used, but the Quran uses the terms Amalul Hasana and Amalul Sayya, which are far more comprehensive. Hasanat means acts that are Haseen. Haseen means very beautiful, very balanced, very proportionate, or result in the creation of Husn, that is beauty, and Husn signifies proper proportion. When a person conducts himself in accordance with the divine law, every act of his helps to bring about Husn in his own personality or to make it balanced and properly proportioned. It is also conducive to the maintenance of balance and proportion in the social order and the universe at large. Because society is sum total of individuals, and if the individuals, those who have changed themselves and followed Amalul Hasna and then come together, then the society starts to change. In the process, the individual develops a balanced personality, and a society rid of imbalances and disharmonies is thereby created, which ensures true happiness to all. On the other hand, there is the kind of conduct that is described by the Quran as Amalul Sayya. Sayya is the antonym of Hasana. It stands for deeds that upset the balance of the individual personality and result in social disequilibrium. The Quran describes various attributes of Allah which are collectively known as Al Asmaul Husna, that is, the divine attributes which are balanced. That is, attributes that are blended in a single being in proper proportion and perfect equilibrium. That is why Allah's being has to be followed through these attributes, divine attributes like Rahim, Kareem, Aziz, Hakim, which are quoted in the Quran. The Quran further calls upon men to develop in themselves the divine attributes, of course, within human limits, with the same balance and proportion. This is the proper way of attaining the growth and fulfillment of the human personality, and this paragraph is taken from Islam Challenge to Religion. Some more aspects, good deeds versus bad deeds. In Surah Al-Furqan, after explaining the consequences of living an unguided life in which self-development does not take place, Quran says, يُزَافَ لَهُ الْعَذَابَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَيَخْلُدْ فِيهِ مُهَانًا. The penalty on the day of Qiyamah will be doubled to him, and he will dwell therein in ignominy. Then the next verse states, Illa man taba wa amana wa amila amalan salihan faulaika yubaddilullahu sayyatihim hasanatin. See how the Quran has explained that how bad deeds are replaced by good deeds. Wa kana Allahu ghafuran rahima. Unless he repents, that is, he does tawbah, and the word tawbah has appeared over here, illa man taba, accepts Iman and does salih deeds, for Allah will change the evil of such persons into good, and Allah is Ghafoor and Rahim. And Ghafoor over here means that all the bad effects of doing wrong, he will be getting protection. And Rahim means then the means of nourishment and development will become available to him, because he or she has now started doing good instead of the bad they have done in the past, or if they have made any mistake, they have to rectify it through this law or through this permanent value. In the next verse, as a general principle, it is reiterated, and whoever repents and performs salih deeds has truly turned to Allah with a true conversion. We can look at the Arabic part in any copy of the Quran. This permanent value can be followed at an individual and family level, even under man-made systems. If parents understand this and practice it in their day-to-day conduct, reminding their children about this value, they will notice a tangible change within a few years. However, it should be followed willingly, not mechanically. For example, thinking, I have to do it as the Quran has said so. This will not bring about that change in the human self which comes after accepting Iman willingly. So it is important that the change which takes place within us is not a mechanical change. We don't do it just saying that, oh, I have to do it. No, it is for my good to do it. I wish to do it. This is my desire to do it. And that kind of sentiment should arise in our heart and mind. Now we go to the next permanent value, Eimaan and Saleh deeds. This permanent value is mentioned in one form or another throughout the Quran. And it is very important that we understand it and grasp it in its true essence, because it holds the key to self-development. If we understand it and then follow it, then the rest of the things become very, very clear when we go through the Quran. Man amila salihan min zakarin aw unsa wa huwa mu'minun fala nuhyiyannahu hayatan tayyibatan wala najziyannahum ajrahum bi ahsani ma kanu ya'malun. Very powerful verse covering lot of important aspects. Whoever acts as salih, man or woman. See, over here it says gender, and then it reaches Iman, which is at a self's level. So the gender disappears and it becomes applicable to self as a human being. And has Iman, verily to him will we give a new life. And that is the beauty of it. They already are alive as man and woman, but Quran over here says that we will give you life, hayatan tayyibatan, that life which is explained in the Quran, that will be purified, higher, eminent life, that will give you loftiness, and you will know that you have got new life. A life that is good and pure, and we will bestow on such their reward according to the best of their deeds. And this is something which we should remember by heart, because it is very encouraging and one only appreciates it once we go through this process of Eimaan and Saleh deeds. Ajrahum bi ahsane. That is the best Saleh deeds which we do, and we achieve a higher eminence, then we go from there onwards. We don't come down unless we give up this path. In fact, this recipe is so powerful that the Quran has linked this to the establishment of power in the land by following this formula. And we have gone through this verse previously. It is worth going through whole of it. وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لِيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Allah has promised to those who have Iman and do Saleh deeds that He will of a surety grant them inheritance in the land, which means they will surely get power in the land so that they can establish the system of Deen. The rest of the verse goes on to explain it. Now, related to this is another important aspect noted in another verse, that is 35:10. Man kana yuridul izzata falillahil izzatu jamiya ilayhi yasadul kalimul tayyibu wal amalu salihu yarfa'uhu. And see over here the kalimu tayyib, that is the words which are pure and good. So the Quran says, if any do seek power, because human beings have a desire to acquire power, and the system of Deen cannot be established unless Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen gets power. So the Quran over here in these three verses, in fact these at least two verses, 24:55 and 35:10, is putting before us very clearly, very perspicuously the procedure to get this power. To Allah belongs all power. That is, through His laws we can get the power and we can understand how we can obtain power. To Him mount of words of purity, that all laws, all values are defined in the Quran, which are pure and good and for our own good. And then Quran says, it is He who exalts each Saleh deed. So if we do Saleh deeds, then these Kalimul Tayyibu then start rising up. That is, these start becoming part of ourself, and those who come together, then they form a very powerful Jamaat. The outer word is the reflection of our inner psyche. This means the Quran helps in knowing the psyche of those who are in power in the world of 2024. Now, next slide is Eimaan and Saleh deeds, expanding this further. What happens when this formula is followed? And those who follow this formula, ultimately, وَتَعْصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, they come together and their differences disappear. Those dissonances which are there in a default position, those disappear gradually. And hold fast all together by the rope of Allah and be not divided. And it is not, when Quran says be not divided, means mechanically you should make an effort not to be divided. It actually happens because of change in heart and mind. The inner psyche changes. We see things clearly in the light of the Quran, that what is good for us and how will it take us further on this path. What sign will appear by doing this? And the Quran says in the same verse, a bit ahead, فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ, He joined your hearts due to this conduct. And this is non-biological affection and affinity, hence will be enduring and will lead to prosperous results. Remember, we have biological relationships, brothers, sisters, parents, siblings, all these, and even friendships and colleagues. But those are, remember, those are biological affections. Those are not ideological unity. Those do not create ideological unity. Quran is creating that ideological unity, which is not only applicable to this physical life, but goes on beyond death. So that thing we should keep in mind, because that cannot come without the Quran. This fa'allafa baina qulubikum simply cannot come without the Quran. Doesn't matter how close one is biologically, because that biological affection, even if we have a very strong unity, and we see those in certain families and even in countries, nationalities, because they are together for economic benefits, that is the physical benefits. Those are not ideological unities. So Quran is putting emphasis on ideological unity so that we create a new life, and that life will then help to create the system of Deen. In another verse, even more powerful wording has appeared. فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ لَوْ أَنْفَقْتَ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مَا أَلَّفْتَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ allafa bainahum innahu azizun hakim. He has placed affection between their hearts, not even if you had spent all that is in the earth could you have produced that affection. But Allah has done it, for He is Aziz and Hakim. And when Quran says Allah has done it, which means we make an effort, we create a desire and need for the guidance of the Quran, then we make a commitment to Allah, and that is how we follow the procedure and His formula. The next question which needs our attention is what is Iman and how do we acquire it? The Quran has described this aspect in various places by drawing human attention to his own psyche. The first stage of this journey is that man should be looking for guidance. If we are not looking for guidance, then Quran will never ever make any sense to us. Doesn't matter how many times we go through it. And Quran says, وَوَجَدَكَ دَالًا فَهَدَى. And there are a number of other verses, and we will expand this because seeking guidance is also a permanent value, and we will deal under that in slightly more detail. And He found you looking for guidance, and He gave you guidance. And this is in the case of the Messenger of Allah. This thought process is predicated on being dissatisfied with the condition of the society in which one is living. Now, next slide is expanding it further, that is Eimaan and Saleh deeds. This looking for guidance serves as an important sign which needs to be emphasized in the education and training aspect within the system of Deen. Those who are aspiring to work for the system of Deen and wish to check the status of their own Iman need to evaluate their own outlook and ask their own selves the question, am I seriously looking for guidance after having become fed up with the man-made systems? So if I haven't fed up with the man-made systems, then forget about the Iman of the Quran. This should lead to becoming curious about the problems created by man-made systems. And this is noted in verse, and we have gone through this verse previously as well. La ikraha fid din qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghayy faman yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah faqad istamsaka bil-urwat al-wusqa la infisama laha wallahu samiyyun alim. Let there be no compulsion in deen. Truth stands out clear from error, which means we should recognize what is truth and what is wrong, what is evil, what is error, what is bad. Whoever rejects taghut, that is whoever rejects the man-made systems and accepts Iman in Allah and then accepts Iman in Allah, it's the cause and effect, has grasped the most trustworthy handhold that never breaks, and Allah is Sami and Alim, which means Allah listens everything and He is knowledgeable, and so should we be. We should also listen to the man-made system and its problems, and we should also gain enough knowledge about the man-made system and then reject it. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes that unless we change our psyche individually and collectively into that one which is presented by Allah, we simply cannot be of any use to the system of Deen. For this, the comprehensive term used is Iman plus Saleh deeds. What changes does this path bring about in our psyche, and what are the signs which the Quran presents for us to look for? The next slide is some signs of interest. In verse, Quran says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Except such as have Iman and do Saleh deeds and join in the mutual reminding of Al-Haq and of patience and steadfastness. So both are important aspects, that we accept Iman, then do Saleh deeds, and as a result of that come together and then do this by coming together. Another verse, Quran says, more details are covered. فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ أَنِّي لَا أُضِيعُ عَمَلَ عَامِلٍ مِّنكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ بَعْضُكُم مِّن بَعْضٍ فَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَأُخْرِجُوا مِن دِيَارِهِمْ وَأُوذُوا فِي سَبِيلِي وَقَاتَلُوا وَقُتِلُوا لا أكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولا أدخلنهم جنة تجري من تحتها الأنهار ثوابا من عند الله والله عنده حسن الثواب. A lot covered in this verse of Surah Al-Imran, and it's worth going through these verses before and after as well to know the true context in which these verses have appeared in the Quran. And their Rabb has accepted and answered them, which means they are praying for something, and if we go through these verses, they are very powerful, which are before this 195 verse. Never will I let the work of any of you, be he male or female, go to waste. And this is the law of requital, that the law of requital, since it works with effects, imprints on our own self, hence nothing can go to waste. If we do good, it will leave its imprint. If we do bad, it will leave its imprint on ourselves. You are members one of another. Those who have left their homes and were driven out therefrom and suffered harm in my cause and fought and were slain, verily I will blot out from them their iniquities on this path and admit them into Jannat beneath which streams flow. A reward from the presence of Allah, and from His presence is the best rewards. Just see, the word sawab has been used, which is rewards. That is, whatever we do, we get the reward for that, we get the remuneration for that, we get, in terms of our self-development, our self becomes more eminent. So it makes it very clear that everything is placed in our hand and Allah is there to grant us the reward for our deeds. And when we do Iman and we do Saleh deeds, of course, then this life is better, as well as we get on to the next plane of higher eminence in the hereafter. This verse and verse 2, 186 make clear the procedure for the acceptance of supplications by Allah, i.e. to get help from the Quran and its guidance. And it is stated in this verse, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. When my servants ask you concerning me, I am indeed near. I listen to the plea of every supplicant when he calls on me. So whoever calls to Allah, the system is such, because He is everywhere. Huwa ma'akum aina ma kuntum. This is what the Quran says. And since He is everywhere, so He will listen to the supplication of everyone. And if we want the supplication to be heard, then we have to follow His laws and take the initiative in our hand. And after acquiring Iman, start doing Saleh deeds, and then things will start falling in place. Let them also listen to my call and accept Iman in me. So the first thing is that initiative is placed in our hand. And the first step is to acquire Iman by seeking guidance, that they may walk in the right way. So there is no mystery in our life. The mystery is created by us because we do not follow the right path. Some signs of interest. Some raw minds who do not understand the significance of the acceptance of Iman may at times think that by just doing some good deeds in their life without Iman, they will also qualify for the paradise which Allah has promised for the Mu'mineen. Human beings have the privilege of living life as they wish, predicated on any assumption which might satisfy their emotive makeup. We can assume anything in this life because we are free to assume. But that doesn't mean that the assumption which we have made is the correct one. This assumption must be based on evidence, both in the physical world as well as in the cognitive world. The Quran deals with the realities of life based on its tangible evidence-based laws and values. We have seen, for example, through these permanent values, that whatever we deliberately think and do impacts our self. And this in turn decides whether it meets the criteria laid down by the Quran clearly and unambiguously. It does not follow the desires of anyone, not even the messengers of Allah. Without Iman, as defined by the Quran, we simply cannot possess that developed self which meets the criteria for the life of the hereafter. And this transformation in the self commences from this life right in this world. And if we use the Quran correctly, we can find out where do we stand in terms of our own development of the self. It is not otherworldly. Quran has given very clear signs and signposted it throughout. The unity of the human self is indivisible, and it is important for each one of us to realize this through the way we think and act in our daily life. If we are in a position to do some Saleh deeds and we fail to do this or delay it, then we do a great loss to our self-development. Now, next slide is Iman without Saleh deeds is not admissible for protection. And I added this slide later on because I came across this verse in chapter 11, which I thought needs our attention and I should share it today. Another aspect which needs to be kept in mind is one which the Quran has drawn our attention to through the example of the son of the messenger Nuh. Nuh supplicated, that is, the messenger Nuh supplicated for the protection of his son before the arrival of the flood. And here is the verse, وَنَادَى نُوحٌ رَبَّهُ فَقَالَ رَبِّ إِنَّ ابْنِي مِنْ أَهْلِي وَإِنَّ وَعْدَكَ الْحَقُّ وَأَنْتَ أَحْكَمُ الْحَاكِمِينَ. And Nuh called upon his Rabb and said, O my Rabb, surely my son is of my family, and your promise is al-haq, and you are the best of judges. And we should also look at this verse regarding the wife of the messenger Nuh, where Quran says that she didn't have Iman. And interesting thing is, why did the messenger only supplicated for his son and not for his wife? And that is a very important point, and I think I have picked it up yesterday. The reply noted in the Quran is Qala ya Nuhu innahu laisa min ahlika innahu amalun ghayru salihin. And this is important. Innahu amalun ghayru salihin, that his deeds are not salih. Fala tusalni ma laisa laka bihi ilmun. Inni aizuka an takuna minal jahilin. He, that is Allah, said, that is Allah replied to his supplication of the messenger Nuh, O Nuh, he is not of your family, for his conduct is non-salih. Now, this is where we have to pause and reflect that the messenger knew his son very well, that what sort of a conduct he has. And I deduce from here that his son must be expressing some kind of an iman, but he was not doing salih deeds which could develop himself, and as a result he made a decision not to go with his father. And this is where situation arises that Hazrat Nuh, that is the messenger, thought that his son is making a mistake, but he has expressed some kind of a iman, and maybe he could be saved. And so Quran over here, Allah, since he knows the secrets of the heart, so he has made it clear to the messenger, so do not ask me that of which you have no knowledge. And that is absolutely important, because acquiring knowledge is also a permanent value, and we will deal with it in another presentation. So acquiring knowledge about ourselves and about others, even if there are children, we should be very clear that what kind of a path they are following and whether the iman they are professing is that iman which they are turning it into saleh deeds or not. If the deeds are not saleh, even if one is saying about iman, then we have a problem. I give you counsel lest you act like the ignorant. We conclude this value with this verse, Inna lazina amanu wallazina hadu wan nasara wasabiina man amana billahi wal yawmil akhire wa amila salihan falahum ajruhum inda rabbihim wala khawfun alayhim wala hum yahzanun. Those who claim to have iman, and this is very important because the verse starts with Inna lazina amanu, those who proclaim that they have iman, and then it says Jews, Nasara and Sabi'in. And then Quran makes it absolutely clear that don't think that this is how our system functions. Man amana billahi wal yawmil akhir. So iman must have two parts, and of course the book, the messengers and malaika, as noted in 177 verse of Surah Al-Baqarah. And then it says this iman will only be proved to be iman when it turns itself into amila salihan. And then they will be able to find it out themselves that they don't have fear and grief which others suffer who do not have iman. And he who accepts iman in Allah and the hereafter and performs saleh deeds, they shall have their reward with their Rabb. On them shall be no fear nor shall they grieve. Now let us go to the next permanent value of today's presentation. No restriction to be placed on free movement of people on Allah's earth. The Quran has stated in many verses that traveling through the earth should help us to see various signs which draw our attention to the relics left behind by former nations. And this should lead to the question, i.e., what happened to all these nations and civilizations? What were the causes which contributed to their demise? For example, in this verse, Quran says, Qad khalat min qablikum sunanun fasiru fil arde fanzuru kaifa kana aqibatul mukazzibin. Many were the ways of life that have passed away before you. Travel through the earth and see what was the end of those who rejected. In another verse, Quran says, Kul siru fil arde fanzuru kaifa kana akibatul mujrimeen. Say, go you through the earth and see what has been the end of those who were criminals. It is an obvious conclusion from these verses and other verses like that there cannot be a restriction placed on the movement of human beings on Allah's earth, which is made available for everyone for the finite physical life. It is also implicit in this that there should be facilities available for people to travel around to learn about these and other signs. Because traveling helps to expand our vision. We come across different cultures, different habits, different traditions, and as a result, and of course, different signs of the earth. And we come to know that there is a purpose behind all this creation. In another verse, Quran says, Ya ibadi allazina amanu inna ardi wasi'atun fayyaya fabudun. O my servants who have accepted Iman. Very important again, amanu. Truly spacious is my earth, hence serve you me wherever you are. So Quran over says, Fabudun, that you should move to a piece of land where you can establish the system of deen so that it can serve as a model. So holding on to a piece of land is something which we should resist. And we should always be prepared to move somewhere else wherever the system of deen can take its shape. Of course, in today's world, this is becoming difficult with each passing day. No restriction to be placed on free movement. Some further elaboration of this permanent value in the next verse. Kullu nafsin zaikatul maut summa alayna turja'un. Every self will taste death and then all will come to us. The Quran draws our attention towards the aspect of accountability and not to consider physical death as evidence of the absence of accountability. We should keep in mind that when Quran says Summa alayna turja'un, it is not a physically going back and being gathered together somewhere in the hereafter. It means that according to Allah's laws, everyone will go and face their deeds and the kind of self they have developed. The addressee in the verse is the human self, which is given assurance that you have a desire to live for eternity. Here is that opportunity to live forever. So if we want to live for eternity, the Quran has given us the clear path to eternity, that what kind of a life we want and whether we wish to go on to the next life and keep evolving and we wish to establish the system of deen over here or not. However, for this, you need to change your outlook and keep this land free for movement. So putting restriction on Allah's earth is creating Iblisi system, satanic system, and creating partners with Allah, which is a very severe injustice to human beings and to their own selves, whoever do it. So that those who wish to establish this system somewhere can do so, do not obstruct their movement. If you do this, then remember your physical death, which will take away the land on which you had falsely laid claim and as a result prevented yourself from understanding the higher purpose of life. The Quran has drawn our attention to the aspect of migration as and when the system becomes established in any piece of land and never to hesitate to leave the present home. Holding on to a piece of land affects the development of the human self, and this tendency to hold on is the product of the Iblisi system, and which the Quran calls Taghuti system. Now, next slide is in relation to Jamaat-e Mu'mineen. So what I've done over here is I've quoted some verses in which we are invited to migrate. وَمَنْ يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُرَاغَمًا كَثِيرًا وَسَطًا وَمَنْ يَخْرُجْ مِنْ بَيْتِهِ مُهَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ يُدْرِكُهُ الْمَوْتُ فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. He who forsakes his home in the cause of Allah finds in the earth many a refuge wide and spacious. Should he die as a refugee from home for Allah and His Messenger, his reward becomes due and sure with Allah. Allah is surely Ghafoor and Rahim. So going on this path will provide us protection and further development. Because when human beings make an effort for a certain cause, they are bound to achieve that. And we have seen it even under man-made system, those who are very powerful can change the world. This verse makes it even more clear. Innal lazina amanu wal lazina hajaru wa jahadu fi sabilillahi ulaika yarjuna rahmatallahi wallahu ghafurun rahim. Those who have accepted Iman and those who suffered exile and fought in the path of Allah, they have the hope of the rahmat of Allah, and Allah is Ghafoor and Rahim. So Allah is not, the way the whole system functions under the Quran is that such people are not left alone. They get that protection and further nourishment and development according to the laws of Allah. Something needing profound reflection in this verse, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آوَوا نَصَرُوا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ. And over here, rizqun kareem has been added with maghfirah. Those who have accepted Iman and migrate and strive for the cause of Allah, as well as those who provide asylum and help, these are the true mu'mineen. For them is maghfirat and rizqun kareem. So rizqun kareem we can only get under the system of deen. A few more aspects of this migration. Innal lazina amanu wa hajaru wa jahadu bi amwalihim wa anfusihim fi sabilillahi wal lazina awa wa nasaru ulaika ba'duhum awliya'u ba'din. Those who accepted Iman and adopted migration and strived with their possessions and selves. And that is important. We have to make available all our efforts on this path. And if we remember, we make a covenant with Allah in this regard. As well as those who provide asylum and help, these are companions of each other. Now let us go to the next permanent value, no contradiction between word and deed. Quran has stated, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. O Jamaat-e Mu'mineen, why do you say that which you do not do? Then it has assigned a severe scale of gravity to this kind of behavior. Kabura maqtan indallahi an taqulu ma la taf'alun. Grievously odious is it in the sight of Allah that you say that which you do not do. So there must not be conflict between word and deed. The point to note in this verse is that it is addressed to the Jamaat-e Mu'mineen, which means that it is a weakness of the human character which needs to be addressed by those who have decided to become Mu'mineen. It also means that those who are not Mu'mineen will display this weakness, and it is necessary to remain vigilant regarding it. Under man-made systems, we experience this kind of behavior across the world in our dealings with fellow humans. This value is flouted frequently at the level of nation states, where the term diplomacy has been coined. And we hear politicians say one thing prior to elections, and when in power they do something else. By addressing the Jamaat-e Mu'mineen, the Quran has made it clear that by accepting Iman, they have made a commitment which should be followed by Saleh deeds, i.e. to be practiced at an individual level, and then by coming together to promote this permanent value in the collective character. This conduct also needs to be monitored and rectified. Procedure to be put in place, that is, it should not be let go unnoticed within the system of deen. If people say something, commit to something and do not do it, then they must be reminded. And those who waste time on these kind of utterings and conversation and wording, they should be discouraged, they should be guided. We should never waste time on futile conversations and talking. In the case of those who say our Rabb is Allah and stand firm and straight. See over here that a commitment has been made by saying that we will follow the system of Rububiyat, we will help to create it, and then remain firm on that. So there is no contradiction, there is no dichotomy between what they say and what they do. Next is a few more comments on this permanent value. By becoming conscious of our thoughts, words, and deeds, we acquire a higher level of consciousness and self-awareness and understand its importance when we start to manifest positive traits in our daily life. And it is important because if we think, particularly people who are in position of power, they can get away with what they say and never do it, even if they are trying to follow the Quran, it means that they are doing gross injustice to themselves, because the self will be hampered, it will be obstructed, it cannot go on to get higher position of eminence. And because one of the things is that they don't realize that they are doing something wrong. Quran says, no, it is a very severe crime which human beings commit, that what they say and don't do it. Some examples of this are being consistently punctual in life, fulfilling our verbal written commitments in everything we do, never waiting for a reminder by those with whom we have made commitments. And it includes that we have made a commitment to Allah, taking responsibility willingly in all our dealings. For example, family, work, business, as a citizen, to our own self, wherever we are on the planet. And it also includes that, for example, if we decide and say to ourselves that I will do this for my own good, then it also becomes a commitment and we must do it. Children should be made aware of this permanent value and should be monitored for their conduct. For example, ensuring that they are always punctual and fulfill their commitments. An important aspect is that the importance of following these values should be explained to them rationally as being for their own good. And see that if this value is followed within a family setup, how much confidence and trust parents will have towards children and children will have towards their parents. Children will know that whatever parents say, they do it and they can rely on that. And similarly, vice versa. Under the system of Deen, sub-clauses will be worked out to obtain maximum benefit from it in the smooth functioning of society. This will also mean that we should not waste time in vain talking. Words which do not turn into deeds are just hot air. Wasting the valuable time of our finite life affects ourself and its development. Let us go to the next permanent value of today's presentation, and it is the last one. Allah's laws are immutable. We experience changes in the laws under the man-made systems on a continuous basis. Why does this happen? This is because these systems are predicated on the assumption that human life ends with death and there is no accountability, and that there is nothing beyond physical death, hence there is no accountability. This may appear to be a strange reason, but if we analyze it closely, then all other reasons will become included in this one big assumption about life. We know through scientific discoveries that the laws applicable to the physical world are immutable and never change, at least as long as this visible system of the universe remains functioning. This means that during the lifetime of any human being, he will live under the same laws as the first man had lived under, and that the last man will also live under. The next point is, this is the reason that the Quran declared, Ma yubaddalul qawlu ladayya wa ma ana bizalamil lil abid. The word changes not before me, and I do not least injustice to my servants. And the Quran says that Allah does not do injustice to anyone because His words don't change, His laws don't change, His values don't change. And we can see from these permanent values that these are applicable to all beings who possess choice and intent anywhere in the universe, anywhere in the universe. For example, one immutable law in the physical domain is physical death, which simply cannot be avoided. The same is applicable to the physical laws according to which the human body functions from birth to death. And I've just noted these two for the physical side. Otherwise, we can see that how the galaxies work, how the solar system is working, how the gravity is working, how the laws related to energy is working. So these things are very potent signs for us, which should motivate us to come to the permanent values of the Quran, which are also immutable. And these should provide great certainty to our mind and to our conduct. Next is elaborating this further, that is, Allah's laws are immutable. The Quran has drawn our attention to the physical laws as well as the laws applicable to the human self and its functioning. The laws and values applicable to the human self are called the permanent values, and we are going through some of these through these presentations. Two words have appeared in the Quran for divine law. One is Kalimatullah, that is Allah's words, which are His laws, defined, outlined, and the other is Sunnatullah, and that is how these are acted upon. By studying the Quran, the difference between these two becomes apparent, that Kalma is the theoretical basis of the law, which can be called the formula. And Sunnatullah is the practical form of this formula, i.e. when that theoretical law adopts a practical form, then it will be termed Sunnatullah. i.e., that path on which Allah is operating or on which He is causing the universe to operate, these are both immutable. So all these laws, that is kalimat, are given in the Quran, and Sunnatullah in terms of system of deen is left to us now to implement it. And as and when the system of deen is established, then that will become Sunnat of Allah. In verse 634, Wala mubaddila li kalimatillah, Quran has declared Allah's words do not change. The Quran consists of the words of Allah, hence everything noted in it is al-haq, and if followed will lead to those outcomes which are explained in it. For example, batil cannot succeed if al-haq is pursued collectively. Similarly, if al-haq is pursued, then even if batil appears to be overwhelming like a seed, it grows gradually and expands as a system and establishes itself. The Quran has provided the reassurance, Le yuhikkal haqqa wa yubtil al batila walau karihal mujrimun, that He may manifest al-haq and falsify batil even though it may be distasteful to criminals. And I've taken it from the Book of Destiny. Next slide is continuing on the same. Even from our dealings with fellow human beings, we experience assurance and certainty from those individuals and businesses which fulfill their commitments and are willing to share our good experience with others. Whereas those who betray our trust and are not trustworthy will let others know and never keep any connection with such people. And so we experience it, that we, for example, nowadays we look at reviews under Google and see that what other customers have said about a certain business. But this is under the relative values. Though Allah is not visible, from these permanent values we can figure out that if this system is established whose foundations are laid on these values, that how stable and firm-footed that system should be. We witness and experience regularly that with the change in government based on parties, the laws change, which impacts on the daily lives of ordinary human beings. This creates a continuous state of uncertainty and fear for people. And this is over and above the physical impact on the economy, social relations, jobs, services. So man-made systems are full of suspicion and speculations and doubts, similarly uncertainty, fear, grief, because laws keep changing, and one country to another laws also change. And we see that and witness in the world of 2024. Finally, in connection with these laws and values, we should keep in mind that if these are not viewed as immutable, then these become relative values and we commit shirk, which leads to doing a gross injustice to ourselves. So we can't say that we can partly follow these values and leave the rest for the man-made values, because the moment we mix these with relative values, then essentially we are committing shirk, which is a supreme injustice in the language of the Quran, and its results become visible before us. And so we cannot follow, mix the values of man-made system with the permanent values of the Quran. Permanent values must be followed like a formula, strictly as laid down by the Quran, and willingly, not unwillingly, not mechanically, but willingly. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.